Well, you might not be spending on some of the guys like Dave Richard wants to avoid. And we're going to take a look at Dave's bust now here on Fantasy Football Today. And again, a lot of this comes down to cost, what their average draft position is. But as you see, one major headliner on this list among many big names is Christian McCaffrey. James Conner's a second-round pick. We know about the story with Akers and Juju battling some injuries, but George Kittle also on this list, and he's going as the fourth tight end. So Dave is not taking any shortcuts here with his busts. And Dave, let's start with Christian McCaffrey. So he's going in average draft position basically as the fourth player overall. But really we know he's going either one or two in the majority of leagues that we've seen. So why is that too soon for you?
It's too soon for me because you know what the downside is. It's 12 games of 0. We've seen it each of the last 2 years. He's taken on 5 separate injuries over the last 2 seasons, 4 of them to his lower body, all involving soft tissue. It's a problem. And the Panthers are saying they're acting like nothing's wrong with him. Yeah, we're going to use him as much as normal. That's what Matt Rule is saying because Matt Rule's fighting for his job. I think Christian McCaffrey has a lot of upside. I don't disagree with the current ADP on him. I'm actually surprised that he's fallen past 5th overall. I'd take him at 5th overall. But I've been in a lot of drafts with you guys, a lot of drafts with other analysts, and I've seen his ADP on other sites. And as a top 2 pick, there's just way too much risk there. There are safer players like Jonathan Taylor, like Austin Eckler. You could say that the receivers are safer. I think Derrick Henry's safer because he hasn't had as many injuries as Christian McCaffrey, and he's got tons of upside too. You guys can have Christian McCaffrey and take your chances with him when he's going to be run into the ground by a desperate Panthers offense this year.
I just think every time Dave talks about Christian McCaffrey, it sounds like he's getting closer and closer to joining us, the RB drafters. Because if you're that worried about running back risk, then you should not be drafting running backs because all running backs have injury risk. Derrick Henry played 1 more game than Christian McCaffrey. He's 2.5 years older. I know Dave can say, yes, McCaffrey missed games 2 years ago, so now I think he's more of an injury risk. It's all arbitrary. The truth is, all running backs are more of an injury risk than wide receivers. We've seen that in the data over the last 10 years. And so if you just want to say all these running backs are injury prone, none of these running backs have close to the upside of Christian McCaffrey. He has outscored the average running back when he's been right by 20%.
And just, you bring this up a lot when we talk about who should be number 1 and you have McCaffrey number 1. How low Jonathan Taylor's point total was for a number 1 running back in PPR over the last how many years?
Amongst running backs that played at least 8 games, he had the 12th highest point per game over the last 5 years. Alvin Kamara had a season that was better. Dalvin Cook had a season that was better. Derrick Henry, I think, had 2 seasons that was better.
Including last year.
Yeah, including last year. Christian McCaffrey had a couple of seasons. If everybody stays healthy, we have no reason to think Jonathan Taylor will be the number 1 running back.
But Dave, you would agree if McCaffrey plays the majority of the season, he's the number 1 player in fantasy, right?
He doesn't even have to play 17 games. If you guaranteed me that he was playing 11 games, I would take him at number 1 overall.
Okay, so the health is the biggest factor for you, and clearly a lot of people either buying in or not buying at all, and so it depends on how you feel about Christian McCaffrey. I've said this a few times on our podcast. I did 2 of my father-son leagues, obviously very inexperienced, not the kids, the adults, some inexperienced fantasy players. I got him in 1 league at 6, my son and I, 1 league at 7, my son and I, another one, and we're pretty thrilled about how that value worked out for us.
That's great.
Let's talk about the next bust that we're looking at, Dave, and that's James Conner, who last year, from the stretch of games that he played without Chase Edmonds, he was the number 2 running back in fantasy behind Jonathan Taylor, and now there's no more Chase Edmonds, and the backups just feel like they're not going to be a threat to him. What's the concern with James Conner going in round 2?
There's a lot of injury concern with James Conner as well, but it's also the fact that he had a ton of touchdowns last year, and Arizona invested in its passing game quite a bit. Marquise Brown for a first-round pick, they want to throw the football. They want to be able to be a team that can pass to run, not necessarily lean on James Conner and ride him to victory. So I think his touchdowns have nowhere to go but down. And you look at his rushing yards and his total yards from last year, it wasn't what you would hope for from somebody who did so well in fantasy. Point is, he was good without the touchdowns. The touchdowns are what made him great. He's got one of the toughest projected schedules this year. That comes with the territory when you play in the NFC West and you're not on the Rams or the 49ers. And I just don't see him being consistent or healthy enough. Case in point, in the past, when we've relied on him, when we've gone to him as an early round draft pick, he's disappointed us. When we've said, forget about James Conner, he's too brittle, he comes through. That's how it feels. And so when you're taking him at the 2-3 turn, I just think it's too early by half a round to a full round.
Yeah, and this is one where I agree entirely with Dave. I may even have Connor ranked lower than Dave does. It's also one where I'm really scared to be wrong about James Conner either way. I draft him, and I'm scared that he's going to play 10 games. I miss him, and I think, man, if he's as good as he was in the second half without Chase Edmonds, then why in the heck didn't I take that guy in the second round?
You have a situation at play here with three prominent players essentially not going to be ready for the start of the season, potentially with Zach Ertz hurt, Rondale Moore hurt, no DeAndre Hopkins. He could have a huge role in the passing game early in the season if those other two guys, along with Hopkins, are not there for the first 6 weeks. That's something to keep in mind with Connor, but I prefer him in round 3 as opposed to round 2. It's basically a few spots, so it's just kind of nitpicking. I don't think we need to spend a lot of time on Cam Akers. I think we all know what the deal is for him here. It's just being drafted too soon. Look, we all know the scenario right now with Akers. And so, Dave, just give me the round where you would be comfortable taking Akers, because I think fantasy managers understand. Like, you take him in round 4 based on his ADP right now, it's just too soon.
It's round 7, which means I'm not getting him. And I don't want to have him because I think it's going to be a headache all year long.
When would you draft him?
Round 5-6 turn.
Right, 5-6 turn. I think non-PPR, I'd look at him in round 5 just because of how running backs go. Round 6 in PPR is where I would look at him. But keep an eye on Darrell Henderson. We're just going to see probably a lot of him and Kieran Williams as well. So Cam Akers at cost right now just way too expensive based on his ADP. These next two guys are certainly more interesting. So why are you out on Juju Smith-Schuster, Dave? Why is he a bust for you?
Because I'm worried about him not being a regular contributor. And I'm actually okay with this ADP. This is another case where when we're drafting, Juju tends to go higher. But on this ADP, I think it's all right. And it's interesting because our ADP includes non-PPR and full PPR. It makes me wonder if it would be significantly higher if it was just full PPR that we were looking at. This is the spot where I would be okay taking him if it were full PPR. This Chiefs offense, it's going to be different. He's not replacing Tyreek Hill. I think he's better against zone coverage than man. They'll see more zone coverage than man. So he could be okay, but he's also got the knee injury. I think his best days are behind him at this point. Getting him in round 7 is really fair. Round 8 is when I'd really like to get him, but I might be wishing to do so.
Another guy kind of like Connor where I can feel scared either direction. I've got him at the 6-7 turn, and I don't feel like I've drafted quite enough Juju Smith-Schuster. I mean, you look at the other names on this roster, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Sky Moore, Mecole Hardman. There's no one that's done close to what he has done at his very best, and he's never played with a quarterback this good. So if he can make that connection with Mahomes and be his leading target earner as a wide receiver, he's absolutely got top 15 upside. But it really discouraged me when he got dinged up again in training camp because he's had so many injuries. I will say he's played 14 games 3 times in his career. He's finished as a top 20 wide receiver all 3 of those seasons. If he plays 14 games this season, he'll probably be a top 20 wide receiver.
It's going to be just fun to see, forget about the fantasy implications, just how Mahomes operates with these guys, because, we started to see a little bit and saw a little bit in the preseason whether that carries over, trying to scale back Travis Kelce snaps a little bit, and so maybe make sure he's fresh for the end of the season. We haven't seen all of these guys working together because Dave alluded to this with Juju with the knee injury. MVS had the concussion situation. Both those guys are fine now, though, so I wouldn't necessarily say they're injury concerns. But I do think that Juju is the best receiver. It's just a matter of, again, when you're comparing him to some of the other receivers in that range. Rashad Bateman, Adam Thielen, DK Metcalf, Darnell Mooney, even Alan Lazard, some of the guys that are being drafted in that range. Juju can easily be better than them, but he could also certainly fall behind them if Mahomes is spreading the ball around. All right, Dave, George Kittle, the 4th tight end off the board, going in round 4. We've had a lot of discussions on various platforms about why that's too soon. Tell our audience here why.
This is assuming that Trey Lance is the quarterback for the majority of the year. I think that they're going to be more of a run team in San Francisco if they're going to do that. And their offensive line is a huge question mark. So Kittle might be asked to block a little bit more. Last year when Lance was playing, there were 99 snaps, 51 of them were pass snaps. Kittle ran 44 routes. He had 4 targets. And when Lance played, San Francisco threw the ball 45% of the time. So that's case in point. Lance hasn't looked great as a passer. Brandon Ayuk has looked great as a receiver. And you know that Debo is going to be Debo. I'm worried about Kittle not getting enough volume to be as good of a fantasy tight end as he had been previously.
It's interesting because I do think Jimmy Garoppolo staying there helps the floor of Kittle, Ayuk, and Debo, because if Trey Lance is a disaster and they lose, then Jimmy Garoppolo's back and George Kittle's probably a top 4 tight end. The risk would be is if Trey Lance is not very good as a passer, they still win and Lance just destroys the league with his running, and then all these guys could be in serious trouble. I agree with Dave. I don't want to take Kittle as tight end 4. I'm fine with him in round 5, but I'd actually take Dallas Goedert ahead of him.